Welcome to Will's Personal Development Show podcast. My name is Will, and today we're going to be talking about how to stop worrying and caring what others think about you. Why am I doing this topic? I sent out a question to my YouTube subscribers, and I asked them what topic would you want me to do a podcast episode on? And the most common answer was this topic, which is pretty surprising. My YouTube subscribers are definitely more high school students focused on learning how to do better in school. So it's interesting they chose this topic. It's just a generally very popular topic in the personal development world. And so I'm partially not surprised. Like, a lot of people want to know about this. There's a reason why Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, sold millions of copies. The title is something that almost it's human nature to care about, to worry about, and to wish they didn't care as much about it. So I'm filming a video version of this and an audio version because one of the subscribers said, "Hey, I know you're going to film an audio version, but can you film a YouTube video of this as well?" Just because that's what I want. So let's do that as well. Obviously, the audio version on Stitcher podcast directories like Spotify, Apple, that's going to have better audio quality. So if you want to listen to that on a run or jog or while you're out, you can do that as well. But let's just get going. So I'm going to frame up all these questions and give some expert advice from Mark Manson and some other people, and then give my own opinions. I think my thoughts on this have evolved over the years. Yes, I have previous content on this, but I think there's maybe a bit more that can be said. Lucas, he wrote in saying, as a YouTube subscriber, he said, how to not care what others think. That's what he wanted me to write about or talk about. And he said, can you also maybe do a video on it? I know you did one 7 years ago, but can you do another one? This one person who has a Korean name says, can you please give advice on how to not give a shit on anyone's nasty opinions about you and staying confident despite all of that? Justin Stevens says, how to stop feeling like you're already okay the way you are and not trying to grow as a person. That one's a little bit different, but around the same realm, because it's also about how to just feel content without always having to care about self-growth, which at least that's what I'm interpreting it as. So that's very, very interesting stuff. So let's just get started here. So first and foremost, let's talk about Mark Manson, because he wrote an article about this. He has this big personal development blog. It blew up a few years ago. He changed the title of his book that he was writing to the same article as a blog, as recommended by his publisher. And that ended up being a great choice. He sold so many copies of his book. He's basically in the Marvel level of book publishers. Like, it's a unicorn. The amount of books he sold, it's very unique. It's unheard of, and so it's a crazy success story. I've seen him speak in person, and that's his discussions of it. He's basically knocked it out of the park, and that's very, very hard to do in the book publishing world. So essentially, we'll have to see like where he goes from here. I know he's written some sequels, but from what I told, they were kind of pressured. He was pressured by the publisher to get those out as soon as possible. But I will say I've read the book, and I think I went through it twice. There's some good tips in there about the topic, but to be honest, like, you might be better off just reading the article. Maybe not. I mean, you should still read the book, but the thing is, the book is more so, at least in my interpretation, it's geared around more general self-development topics that I personally like a lot, and I'm glad he talks about, like happiness, what brings happiness, what doesn't, and other like more philosophical but very important topics around what brings us happiness and what brings a fulfilling, purposeful life, beliefs, certainty, and all this other stuff. around the hedonic adaptation. And I believe what happened was he was writing about all these topics, and he decided to bring people in with what they wanted, and then talk about other stuff that maybe they needed. Because I think, especially in American culture, you're told all these material things will bring you happiness, and they don't. And that's a huge issue, and I'm glad this book brings it out. But the issue with that is maybe only like the first 10% of the book really addresses actually how to not give a crap. But then again, you really don't need that much. You don't need a whole book to explain it. So what exactly does he say? One of the things he says is that you have a limited reserve of fucks to give in a way. And I'm going to hold my judgment or kind of personal opinions until after I explain, because I think he has some good points, and then there's some things I selectively disagree with. But essentially, you have a certain amount of things that you can care about. Everyone has this reserve, and so if you don't make the choice on what to care about, then your body, your reactive mind, your reptilian mind will do it for you, and that's a big issue. So that's one big thing that he talks about a lot in his thoughts about not giving a crap. And another part of it is when you kind of give yourself to this feedback loop of hell, as he calls it, where you just kind of let your emotions dictate you and you react off them. If you feel angry, you feel more angry or anxious, then that's not really helping anyone. Instead, what if you just kind of short-circuited that and said, why do I just not care about feeling that bad? And you just say to yourself, like, okay, I feel bad. That's, who gives a crap? Let's not feel that way anymore. So I will add a little bit of thought here. I think my reaction to some of his stuff was like some of it's good. I'm not gonna lie, some of it was good, but other parts of it was like, okay, but like that's just going to make it. It's going to be easier said than done for some people. Some people are just not really good at, short-circuiting that, because it's other people's, it's their reptilian mind, and they can't just shut that off if they don't want to. So that's another part of it. He also talks about how not giving a crap is different from being indifferent. And it's kind of a similar analogy to how being courageous is different from being fearless. And I'm more courageous than fearless. I've done a lot of things that scared me to death, and I still did it because I knew it was the better thing to do. And that's the more admirable thing to do it with that fear, because that's much harder than just naturally being fearless. Fearless is you really don't have any fear about doing it. And that's different from doing it anyway despite being very courageous. So in a similar vein, not giving a crap is different from being indifferent, because not giving a crap, he's arguing, is, you still have that fear or choice, but you're making a decision to not care as much about it despite that fear and negative emotions inside. Whereas indifference, you don't care either way. He says, a sneaky truth about life, there's no such thing as not giving a crap. You must give a crap about something. You can't be an important and life-changing presence for some people without also being a joke and embarrassment to others. I think this is a bit of a profound point in a way, and I like it to a degree. The thing is, there's definitely certain people who are genetically just wired to not give a crap. That's just in their wiring, that's how they are. But from what he's saying, there's also, to live a good life, anyone has to, at some point, care about something, whether that's their family, their relationships, their marriage, their wife, their job. So everyone cares about something. It's just who you allocate and who you choose to give a crap about that matters a lot. So fascinating way of looking at it. a bit profound or kind of higher level, maybe needlessly so, but still very important because it's not about eliminating care whatsoever. If you did that, you'd be some type of shell of a person. It's about making a choice. So very, very important stuff. And then he goes on to kind of like the kind of stuff he wanted to talk about, which isn't just about not caring. He talks about how pain and loss are inevitable, and that's more about grieving and tragedy, in my opinion. But I guess you can apply them a bit to not giving a crap, because he's basically getting almost Buddhist in a way, and saying that suffering is inevitable, and it's this bearing of suffering and knowing that suffering is life, that brings life its meaning. And then he starts talking about some other stuff, like the greatest truths in life are usually the most unpleasant to hear. Don't hope for a life without problems. There's no such thing. Hope for a life full of good problems. Definitely getting more kind of Bruce Lee here. And so that's all fine and good. But let's focus on the not giving a crap. I'm going to jump to some stuff by another expert, you could say. He's the founder of Mind Valley, Vishen Lakhiani, $100+ million business, super busy entrepreneur, author of Code of the Extraordinary Mind. His business is basically like a spiritual self-development info product business, where he brings on all these teachers to teach online courses. And essentially, he talks a lot about self-development through the book, but he does touch on this topic in certain parts of the book. And one of the things he brings up is the art of being unfuckwithable. They love to use these curse words, and I don't curse, but it's really tough to do this without mentioning these words. So he coined this term, or maybe he brought it from someone else, but it was this like nice fun way of saying when you're at peace and in touch with yourself to the point where nothing anyone says or does can bother you, negativity basically can't touch you. And it's this Zen state of unfuckwithableness. And so how do you get to this state and so forth? Well, you could read the book, but if you wanted a summary, basically he talks about different elements of how this is brought about. People have the unique ability to define how to respond after stimuli, and so that's part of the issue. And he also talks about making your love and fulfillment come from within. There's those internal and external beliefs. There's all sorts of stuff around validation. Where are you getting your validation? Is it from the external world, or is it from your internal achievements? That's another way. Obviously, big fan. He's a big fan of meditation, as is a lot of people. That can help. Maybe it definitely can help calm your mind or help you be in better control of your emotions. So that's another thing. And it's ultimately about not being affected by your environment and making that choice. He touches on limiting beliefs and those scripts in your mind. He calls it rules, bullshit rules that you've been brought up to believe. He has this whole Happy Meal story where as a kid he couldn't eat at McDonald's and it seemed so epic, but he couldn't eat there even though all the ads and his friends were eating there because his religion said you couldn't eat beef. One day he kept asking his mom, like, why can't we eat beef? And his mom said, I don't know, like, why don't you find out? He did his research and he decided that Hindus just didn't eat cows because they honored them as pets. But now dogs are the standard pets, so it's okay. So he discovered a rule, a BS rule, and so he convinced his mom through this reasoning to eat beef and eat that burger. So basically, his mom was basically supportive in his journey, and it allowed him to uncover a lot of these limiting beliefs. He calls them rules or false beliefs. And then he lists out a bunch of them, like you need to go to college, you need to be loyal to your culture, you must obey religion, you can only have one religion. These things make a good parent. I don't have the right circumstances to succeed. So he puts this all in his book. And so how does this relate to not giving a crap? Well, maybe there's a bunch of rules in your head around, what you should care about or what you shouldn't, such as if some anonymous YouTube comment or social media comment talks negatively about you, you have to take this personally and respectfully and as if this is someone you value their opinion of, and it's important to care about that person and consider it as a serious, significant assault to your ego or reputation. That's a rule. Probably that guy's an anonymous, immature, childish guy who maybe has a flawed opinion. Maybe not. I don't know. But it doesn't guarantee that that's someone worth valuing your time over. Where do these limiting beliefs come from? Childhood, social pressures, culture, religion, and so forth. And so he talks a lot about just unearthing these and realizing that some people are overcalibrated and just care too much. So interesting stuff there. And, there's different arguments that he puts out to potentially work on unearthing your rules and getting to that unfuckwithable state, self-acceptance, and so forth. Now, you're itching for my opinions on this, I know, but I want to add a little bit more of the credibility from these apparent experts before giving my lowdown, my truth, or at least my opinions. I would agree with a lot, but there's definitely some stuff that I'm like, and I'll explain why. So, jumping back to Mark Manson, he does have a little bit more to say about not giving a crap. I mean, the title was just genius, and he's really good at kind of taking these more complex topics and then translating them to kind of bro speak in a way, in a very artful way, and that's really how he's made his money. But he also says a conventional self-help advice will tell you to just visualize success and think about the person you want to be and reinforce that idea. Everyone wants you to believe the secret to a good life is to get that prettier car, girlfriend, so forth. But it's ultimately about just not giving a crap. Now, here's where I was like, okay, you're probably just trying to alter your book a bit to fit the title. And, I'm not saying it's a bad book. I gave it a good rating on Goodreads. But he continues by saying it's about just not caring less. It's caring less and caring about what's true, immediate, and important. And he talks about how most of the things that we think are a crisis, a material crisis, are stuff we don't need. We don't need all these TVs, extra clothes, goods. And then he gets all kind of existential and spiritual about it. And maybe a bit minimalist, but he brings up some good points, and talks about how accepting your experience of life is about being great and wonderful, and you'll never be happy if you continue to search for that happiness, what happiness consists of. You will never live if you are looking for a meaning of life. I will argue that there's a lot of really good points in this book, and when I ask people, like, what did you come out of this book learning, they usually summarize it in like one or two sentences and say it wasn't as good as they thought. I would disagree to that extent. There's a lot of detailed points about different elements of life success, but it can definitely all mishmash and merge into one because it's all around the same thing. Another thing he uses as a mechanism is to realize that you're going to die someday. Maybe you have 40 years left. That's not a lot of time. 50 years left, maybe 60 at most. And so maybe you have a doubling of what you already lived, or maybe a tripling. But he's using that as a mechanism to say, who gives a crap about what this guy's thinking about you? Will it really matter? Like, your clock is ticking. Chances are on your deathbed, that's not really going to matter. Like, time is moving faster and faster. And that really sucks when you think about it. Like, you may only have a doubling. Some people, they die at 30, 20, 40. You never know. Like, flip on the news, People die in car crashes. They die with illness, cancer. Everyone seems to have cancer these days at young ages, which sucks. So when you realize that, you realize you have a certain amount of F's to give, and that's not going to be something you care about anymore. Like whatever you're thinking about is probably minor. And I'm assuming that some guy in school, but it could be anything. You realize, okay, I have a certain amount of F's to give, not going to give it to this anymore because I'm going to die soon. Time is ticking. Hurry the heck up. Everyone you know is going to die soon. And in your short life, you have to make decisions. So I thought that was a great point. And he has basically three main points to prioritize your thoughts, what you care about, based on your limited resources. And it starts with personal values, but the first real principle is just realizing it's not about indifference. It's about your comfort with being different, and choosing what's important and unimportant. Number 2, the second principle is to not care about adversity. You must first care about something more important than adversity, more important than suffering, whether that's a bigger mission or purpose or whatever, what have you else. I mean, also a great point. I care more about helping people on my YouTube channel. So I get a lot of crappy comments, and they sometimes really will hurt me, and they suck. Some people it's just a law of large numbers. People will say that because when you reach enough of them, there's always someone who's going to say something snarky or mean, or think that you won't see it, or they're hiding behind some anonymous profile so they think they can get away with it. Or they're just nasty people who have their own issues in life, and that's the case as well. But if you have something bigger, like you're trying to help others, make a change, and it doesn't have to be something huge like end slavery or segregation. It could be something just that you care about more, that can really push things aside. And then his third point is, whether you realize it or not, you're always choosing what to care about. The key is to gradually prune the things you care about so that you only give a crap about the most important. So, okay, now it's time for me to step in and give my own thoughts on this. And my opinions have definitely evolved over the times. First off, most and majority of people, they care about what others think. And to a degree, that's important. You need some of that to live an effective life. It's required empathy so that you can gauge people properly and have decent social skills and career skills. I mean, if you didn't care about that at all, most people would just plateau, right? Like they would have stinky feet, stinky breath, a bunch of things that they should improve, but they don't because they don't realize, they're not sensitive enough to realize it matters. The issue, I think, is that maybe people care too much sometimes when they know they shouldn't. And so that's really the question they're asking. And so I think that's the first point. Second point is, there are a certain amount of people who just have the right dialing genetically, maybe even more so towards the point of just not caring about it. And that's something that you really can't control. Some people, they just don't care whether they want to or not. And you probably met those people, but they're in this low minority. And so what about, choosing to care about certain things? I already kind of mentioned this. It's easier said than done. Like Mark Manson saying that you can do this, and to an extent you can. But I think the natural reaction is like, obviously I don't want to care about this person or thing, but my emotions, my reptilian mind is still thinking about it, caring about it. I've definitely been there many times. So that's another frustration. So what the heck do you do? I would say this. For me, I think that I've experienced this many times. Part of me realizes that some of it just comes from shielding away from it. And realizing it's abnormal. And that's mostly YouTube comments because, anytime in previous history, you're never going to have to face hundreds for some people, millions of comments, many of which are nasty or just land the spectrum. And that's abnormal. And so that shouldn't be something that you see on a daily basis. It's human to not have a good reaction to that. That's why a lot of these entrepreneurs and influencers, they have an executive assistant that screens the comments, finds the ones that are actually realistic and constructive advice, and that gets relayed to the appropriate people or the influencer, who then makes improvements on their content. And then they don't get personally offended. I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs do that through my own podcast listening and research. Now, obviously, you have like the social media fanatics like Gary Vaynerchuk, who says you got to respond to every comment, every YouTube comment. And that's still something that haunts me to this day and really gets me out to respond to a lot of these comments. And the issue is, like, I no longer think that's the right approach oftentimes, even if you're an up-and-coming YouTuber, unless you have really, really thick skin. Because sometimes, that one, it's just psychology. Basic psychology tells you that one negative comment is just going to cue you over those 10, 20. And, he has that same advice he gives, like, who are you going to, why would you care about this horrible person who would go out his own way to leave his nasty comments on your videos? That's their issues, and you shouldn't let that affect you, because Gary is saying that person is just so hurt that, if anything, you should feel sorry for them, and you should feel empathy for them. I would say that's something of a more sophisticated thing that, especially for younger people, it's harder to really fathom. And I think just telling them that it's not going to work enough, just from personal experience, because you're just going to get bombarded with negative comments, and that negative thing is just going to sting nonetheless. It doesn't matter if you're trying to exercise empathy, which is probably not a skill set or area of the brain that for young people is really developed much. So they can try and do this, but then they're just still going to get so snarked and hurt by some negative person who may have attacked them personally. So I would say a certain amount of shielding, but shielding and running away from it is not the answer to all your issues, because sometimes you have to face it. And, especially from what my viewers are asking, they probably have to face this in real life. It's maybe some classmate or something. So how do you not care about it? I faced this in school too. I still do, to agree. I definitely, it's a mixture of choosing what to care about, and being rationally smart about it. Because some things you have to care about. It's not all about just this blind not caring. I know people who are just uncalibrated in this, and it's like, if you have some things that affect your career and presentation, like really sloppy clothing or something, and people are telling you this, not to be negative, but out of constructive feedback, like, hey, dude, that's, everyone else is wearing a suit, like, you should really wear a suit as well, because this is a big internship. That's something you should care about. So you have to have a certain amount of discretion. And I see, like, I've definitely seen classmates who are just uncalibrated, and they just go full, I don't care, like, okay, everyone thinks I'm weird, I'm just gonna not care further. Like, some of it you should kind of pull out, take your ego aside and pull out as constructive feedback to improve. But there's also some discretion as to choose what not to care about. And I've definitely been there, because I've definitely been the odd man out, as often the only Asian man in a room filled with Caucasians or African Americans or what have you. And so that plus my nerdier days, or just my low income days with my family, I had some questionable fashion choices, or I was just not like the most cool guy there. And so when people say negative things or say something about you, how do you not care about that? And I would say part of me, like, because I'm pretty normal, like, I'm not that outlier who doesn't care genetically. I'll get initially offended a little or a little hurt, but I can definitely choose to switch it off to an extent. And once you do it enough, it actually starts, you start feeling it less. And it's not about numbing the pain or anything. It's like, part of it's rational. It's like, this is something that is frivolous. It's ridiculous. If anything, they're being bullies. And I know that. And maybe they even know that deep down. So if they're making fun of this coat I'm wearing, like, that's on them. And, I choose not to give them a reaction because that's my choice. Everyone has that choice, that freedom, that right of their attitude. And so I'm not going to support that or give them the privilege of adding any fuel to it. I think there was one time in high school where I really didn't have a good wardrobe of clothes. So I was just like, screw it. I am going to wear something that my mom passed down that was kind of off the wall, but like, it was a fashion choice, and I wanted to see, like, I want to be more fashionable. So it was basically this fur leather. It wasn't leather. It was a fake fur leopard jacket. And when I wore that, some people were like, whoa, like, yeah, Will, like, come on, like, can't believe you're wearing that. But many of them were like kind of supportive in a way. They're like, yes, that's a cool thing to wear. I love that you're wearing that. And then, like, towards the end of the day, like, I was wearing that, and I was at my high school track practice, and one guy was like, Will's the man, he's wearing that. So they're kind of supportive, but also kind of like, like, man, that's a weird thing to wear. And, I chose to lean into it. When people kind of have that, like, I wear it with pride. Like, part of it's just like confidence. Like oftentimes it's not so much the outfit as the confidence. I mean, to an extent. And so when you're in those situations, sometimes you lean into it. And I was kind of like showing it off with pride, like, yeah, I'm unique in a way. So basically, like, this one girl, like, got snarky with it, and they were like, this guy isn't cool. This guy isn't the man. What are you even talking about? And she was having a bit of a bad attitude. And rather than add fuel to the fire, and get insecure about it, or say, argue back, I was just like, okay, cool, whatever you think. And I, started my running routine. That was more important to me at the time. Good grades and doing well, or putting in my dues in track and field. So we went out to run like 3-5 miles, and I was like, okay. And then I started to run. Everyone else started running. That was the end of it. We got back from our run and did some more cool down exercises, and it was the end of the day. And I wasn't an expert at it. I'm still not. I would say I'm more of someone who's gone through some struggles, maybe like the average person out there, and sharing what I've learned along my journey. And so I'm sure there's people who would have done it better. I think Bruce Lee is something I drew a lot of inspo from after reading his biography. And he was someone who did it better than me. He truly leaned into things that his brethren were ashamed of. There's a quote in the book that was very poignant that I remember to this day. It was from one of his female friends that he met in America. And she said, in a time where Asians were ashamed or tried to hide or pretend like they were like everyone else and not Asian in a white culture, he was someone who wore that proudly on his chest, who was proud of it, and showed that off to people, and made them admire that he was Chinese. So, still so incredible to this day, because like that's still something that happens to this day, where people try and hide and fit in. So I'm not saying you have to go out and lean into it all the time. I am saying that the natural emotional response of caring what other people think is normal. Most people have it. That's why these books sell so many copies. As far as how to deal with it, you can't always just cut out those emotions. Those are going to be there reactively on some extent. But that's only part of who you are. That's the reptilian part of your mind. You have the rational mind, you have the other parts who take a second and think. And whether that's more of a unique situation like YouTubers or social media influencers, or just students in school, students in their internship or their first job out of school, there are going to be those moments where that bully, that classmate, even those customers are just mean. I've had food and dining jobs, and same thing there, law of large numbers. When you have 100, 1,000 people, 1,000 customers that you have to, take their order with on a daily basis, there are going to be some bad eggs. It's just the law of large numbers. And some of them are just really rude, mean, entitled to you, and it's unfair. And some of them can be offensive. I've had those situations where they're just really crappy people, and they may even say some nasty stuff to you, and that just sucks. You're gonna feel it, but then you let your rational mind come in, and you tell yourself, that was unfair, and I don't just think that based off biased opinion. If I were to ask my friends, even the manager, they would say the same thing, and they would probably have supportive advice to give on that. And so I shouldn't let this affect me, because that person doesn't deserve that, and that person is at fault here. So sometimes you can do that, and it will not lessen all the pain, but for me, it's enough to realize it's lessened enough that I can move forward with it. And of course, with certain other drills, taking some time away. I've talked about some of those drills in the relaxation and stress reduction podcast episodes and YouTube videos. Those can really just take your mind off of it, whether that's exercising, listening to music, doing something else, cooling down. You'll start to feel it less. If you surround yourself with positive people who you really trust, your deep friends, your family, who really love you and know who you are, that's what really matters. That will remind you, or even just snap your mind away from this ridiculous thing. And so that's really important too. I just want to close by saying that there's so much content on the internet about this topic, and more to come. I'm glad you value my opinion, only because I feel that maybe there's a little bit of unique advice here that could maybe help you a bit more. There's going to be all sorts of tips online, even stuff I didn't say. And if you want to Google that and test that all out, that's another way of just, seeing what works for you. Some people will say, I have this Psychology Today article in front of me, and they're saying some different stuff too, like let go of perfection, keep things in perspective, find your tribe, accept a helping hand, be your own friend, get to know yourself. What do you really like? What do you really want? Are you making choices about your career because you want them? Create a new mindset. Keep things in perspective. These are all different things. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. And I would say test them out, see what works for you. But I think at its core, it's about, really coming to a thought process for systems to calm down that reptilian and emotional reactive mind, and then bringing in that cognitive rational mind to eliminate biases and rationally analyze, is this constructive feedback? Sure, this person may have delivered it harshly or stupidly, or is this just someone being horrible to you needlessly? And for me, there's definitely been a lot of times where I've gotten horrible feedback or realized I need to stop caring about this because the person was just being nasty. I've talked about how there's certain obsessed haters here on my YouTube channel who just kind of talk about topics that are obviously not even related to what I have to say. This one guy, for years, he just kept leaving comments about, oh, your dating life sucks and all this stuff. And even though the video had nothing to do with that, some of the videos had to do with studying tips. And I realized that was him. That was on him. So once you realize that, and you realize, no, this is his own issue that he's working out, and it's really not constructive to care about it, then you can move on. Then you can kind of start to use these drills, these exercises, which, the internet is abundantly filled with them. You can start to realize, okay, what is actually helpful for me, what I want, what's constructive and productive for me, and then make the right choice to care about it or not. Yeah, so for that situation with the person who kept leaving negative comments, it took me a couple years before I realized this was an issue with him. He was negatively screwed up in many ways, and you could tell he was doing that because he was leaving these very verbally abusive comments about how I suck in my dating life. And I kept blocking him, and then he kept creating new accounts, and I must have blocked him at least 100 of his accounts, because it shows a list of accounts I've blocked. And I could tell it was him because he always had that same negative phrasing of his comments, and would just point this out when it had nothing to do with the topic of the video. Sometimes I just realized at first I was really hurt by it because it was very a personal attack. And over time, he kept doing it, and I just started to use my empathy more, and I realized, this still sucks. It's not about completely eliminating the pain, but it's realizing that this person has his own issues, and you could tell it more and more based on how unrelated the topic of the video was to what he said, and how he kept obsessively doing it. So he was finding some very unhealthy and obviously very terrible way of working out by tearing others down. He should probably just go to a professional therapist or something, but instead he was attempting to work out his problems by verbally assaulting someone else. So that really sucked. And now he's kind of died down after many years of doing it. But, I wouldn't be surprised if he came back or something. But as I said, that's something that I've chosen not to let affect me. And it may not ever be 100% where I can cut him out. But, with the tactics I've mentioned and the fact that I have a higher purpose here, a purpose of helping others achieve their success, and having seen a lot of thank you comments and messages on people who have dramatically increased their grades or improved their life, even someone who found his wife through some of my tips on self-growth in health, wealth, happiness, and relationships, all these various areas of self-development, from habit formation, productivity, and I've seen those thank you messages. I realize that is more important than views, subscribers, or some anonymous person's random comments on the web. And so that's what keeps me going, and I'll keep going. And especially if they're trying to get me to quit or stop, then why should I? If anything, if someone's going to negatively insult me, I'm not going to do what they want me to do. That would just be letting them win. I'm going to keep creating content if they want me to stop creating content. And they insulted me. I mean, of course, you don't want them to win. So those are some tactics that I use. And obviously, you may not ever have to deal with something like that because many of you don't have YouTube channels or anything. But I think it definitely translates to real life to a degree. Obviously, you won't face the volume of negative comments that someone with 1 million subscribers would. I don't have 1 million either, so I can only imagine what that's like. But you could definitely face, sometimes in certain ways, more poignant attacks, because that's someone, you see physically, viscerally in real life, whether that's the school bully or someone with a real face and flesh that comes up. I will say, generally speaking, the comments are less pointed in real life because people, when they can't hide behind anonymity, they get a little bit more scared or respectful or friendly. But still, some people, there's various ways that they can still potentially hurt you or get you concerned. For example, they may make fun of you. They may point something out about you physically that you're insecure about. They may physically or verbally attack you for whatever reason. There's a lot of different things. Or maybe, there's just something that you're insecure about that they keep bringing up. And, there's a bunch of different ways of dealing with it. So I remember one time where I even made friends with the bully. And I said, hey, this is probably a big misunderstanding, or, you're making fun of me, and that was really rude, but, maybe we could be friends instead of enemies and work things out. And it actually ended up turning into a good relationship. And the person was definitely uncalibrated at the time and doing a lot of hurtful things without even realizing it. And some of that, didn't completely change, but he definitely started to mature more, and we did become much friendlier. That's a unique way. You don't have to do that, but there's definitely lots of areas of potential growth here that you can really latch onto and look at from a different angle or test something else out. There's a great video by PewDiePie. He made it like several years ago, but it's still on the web, and I point people to it. I wrote a blog post and embedded it in there. It's called 5 Tips to Really Stop Giving a Crap What Others Think, or something like that. If you search that phrase and then add PewDiePie next to it on YouTube, you'll probably find it. And although, he's basically just helping his followers out, and he admits he's not an expert at this, I felt the tips were really good. He admitted that he had a lot of things that he felt was imperfect about how he looked. And that's okay. No one's perfect, and who cares what someone else says when they're going out of their way to say it to you? Now, I think in terms of physical things, that's something that is brought up a lot. And for me personally, I think that, sure, there's certain things that you can constructively improve, but there are things that you have to feel good about, because that's what's going to lead you to a healthy state of mind, to a productive state of mind. For me, obviously, there's insecurities. I know it's brought up a lot. I have very big nostrils, and people are ruthless about it on the internet. But here's the thing. That's not something I can change or would want to change even through plastic surgery, because that's just who I am, and I don't think it's really going to devastate me. Most of the things that people say, point out to you, chances are they're not as big a deal as you think. Is this really going to stop me from dating? No, I've seen pretty darn ugly guys get with really hot girls. So I know personality matters more, first off. And obviously I've seen people get so insecure about it that it becomes an obsessive thing that's very unhealthy. They're constantly binging or throwing up food, or obsessed with their weight at all times, or they lose so much weight and they still picture themselves as overweight, and it can get very unhealthy. So, I realized that to an extent, you have to be mentally healthy and fine with who you are. And it's okay if that doesn't lead to, some fantastical result of, meeting your prince or princess and some perfect supermodel girlfriend. Like that's okay. You have to be realistic with who you are, what you can achieve. And if someone else has to point that out and they say it, it's usually because they're not really thinking about you. They're being immature. They're assuming you won't read it, or that they can make fun of it through the comfort of their anonymous computer screen without it really affecting you. They don't see you as a person. They see you as just this object. And so when you realize that, that can also help realize that this is, this is not something that you should really pay attention to, because they're not giving you respect. So why should you give them respect? So all in all, just to give you an example, that's one thing that I've dealt with. And I chose not to really have it affect me, because I know, that's not something I can change. And even if it did, the impact would probably be much less than you think. And it's about my own mental contentedness and what I want out of life. Everyone's their own unique person. There's only going to be one of you ever. And you have your own goals, your own dreams, and your own passions. And so, someone can give their opinion based on their limited experiences about how you should be or how you shouldn't be and how you should look. But chances are they're not really understanding who you are, or being respectful of you, or seeing you as that person. And even in real life, if they're making fun of you in that way. And honestly, it's about pulling out what's actually constructive and true for achieving my goals, not their goals or what they think my goals should be. And then choosing not to ignore the rest that's just frivolous or stupid. So, the big nose comments, if anything, I think it's important to learn how to make fun of yourself and be playful. Those are the people I respect most. The people who can laugh at themselves and laugh at their own flaws. I just see them as so confident, so wise, and so fun to be around, that I really respect those people. And so I try and be more like that and say, like, okay, yeah, I got a big nose, I'm a pig. So that's something that doesn't come naturally to me, but I have learned from people I look up to. At the same time, I know what I care about, and I know that, people saying certain things, if they're not aligned to my goals, then who cares? Sometimes I'll get like feedback and it's like, okay, like, what have you accomplished and why are you credible? And sometimes like the feedback's like, okay, they haven't accomplished anything and they're giving me business advice. Okay, maybe I shouldn't take it. Or they're saying something more poignant that maybe is needlessly harsh, and that obviously sucks, and you shouldn't care about that because they need some help working on their own delivery. But there's a small part of that, maybe 20% or up to 80%, that's actually constructive feedback. I've gotten some feedback on my fashion sense, or on the pictures I've chosen for dating profiles that I requested, and the feedback was harsh. It was like, dude, you look like a super feminine nerd in these photos, and that's not nice to hear. And they could have delivered it better. But after hearing the same advice numerous times, I realized, okay, part of that's true. Maybe I could switch up these photos. So there's part of it that it's back to that. But usually when people ask about this, I feel like it's usually about stuff that sometimes really is just not worth your time. And if you guys have any more specific things that people talk about, then I can elaborate further. But that's what I got for you. Hopefully it helps. Not giving a crap about what others think is also related to shame at some points. So, for example, I remember a period of my time where I was partially ashamed, and I shouldn't have been, but I was ashamed that I had graduated from school and I couldn't find a job. And so, when my friends asked me, what were you doing? Instead of saying, I was still looking for work, I told them that I was, running this online business around personal development, which wasn't really true, because like my business was basically like barely making money, maybe a couple $100 from affiliate sales a month. So That was a big thing. Like I remember that one friend specifically. I think he was applying or in med school. So there was a lot of that Asian shame going there with your parents expecting you to do well. So, part of it is staying the course and rationally making that decision that, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to follow my passion, and I think that it will pay off, but it's just going to take a lot of patience. And so if you have that rational framework and you think that that's a risk, but it's a risk worth taking, and that you shouldn't care what your parents and others think because you think it'll pay off in the long run, and you'll be happier and you'll enjoy what you do and maybe even make just as much, if not more money through that career path, that's something you should stick to. And even if your emotions might get in the way sometimes, you still have that choice of how you act and how you behave. And so if I would have gone back, I might have just been like more honest. I would have just said like, hey, I'm still looking for work, but at the same time, I think I want to follow what I'm passionate about. And part of that's personal development, but part of it's also marketing and advertising. And I think in the long run, that'll lead to a income and passion that I love. And even though now it doesn't look like it will, I don't care what others think, and I'm going to pursue it. And chances are, sometimes, especially if they're friends, family, people that love you and should support you, sometimes, not all the time, they'll be like more supportive than you think. And sometimes they won't, but that's okay. That's the choice that you have to make rationally. And over time, that will affect your feelings, how you conduct yourself will, and your body language. If you choose to make it that way, it will affect how you feel, which will affect you actually not caring as much. So that's how it goes. And, sometimes it will lead somewhere that's well worth it. And so best of luck to you all. Please leave a rating for my podcast on Apple Podcasts. It will make a huge difference in helping me get my message out there. Let me know what you think. Thanks for listening. And you can check me at willyoulaugh.com. And otherwise, thanks for listening. Peace.